I'm John Horn, and I'm your host for today's half hour with Porcelain War. I'd like to start by introducing two of the people who made this documentary. First, Brendan Bellomo, director, writer, editor, and then director and subject, Slava Leontyev. For people who have not yet seen Porcelain War, Brendan, can you tell us a little bit about what your documentary is about?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us, John. And Porcelain War is a story about three Ukrainian artists who actually stayed behind in Ukraine after Russia invaded, not only to continue creating art, but also taught themselves how to defend their families and defend their home. And I helped teach them how to bring their story to the screen and to audiences around the world.
So let's take a look from the film itself right now.
Ми обрали працювати з порцеляною. Порцеляна крихка, але вічна. Вона витримує страшенний жар. І після тисячоріч під ґрунтом може бути відновлена.
У нас же разделение труда. Славик создает формы, он их лепит, обжигает и дает мне в руки готового зверя.
Коли я спостерігаю, як Аня малює, мене трохи морозить.
So first of all, the war in Ukraine has only gotten worse since filming on this documentary ended. For people who haven't seen the film or have seen it and are curious, are there any updates on some of the people who are featured in the film?
We can certainly say that it's been an incredibly difficult situation. And at the same time, we're very, very grateful that the people who are featured in the film, Andrey and his family, his girls are safe and are lucky to be abroad. And the subjects who helped actually film their process of training themselves to fight, the members of Slava's Special Forces unit called Saigon, they are all still miraculously okay, but they keep seeking out more and more difficult and impactful missions because they love their civilian lives. These are peace-loving people. Before the Russian invasion, they were home contractors, they were IT professionals and farmers, and they don't want to fight a minute longer than they have to. And they're lucky to still be okay, but everybody is in grave danger. It's a very serious situation, as you know.
Slava, before we start talking about the making of this film, when this idea is floated, you're living in a war zone. There are missiles, there are bombs, that's a daily reality. You're also helping train citizen soldiers, and you're continuing to make art with your partner, Anya. So when the idea of making a movie is first pitched to you, is there part of you who says, I've got plenty on my hands right now. I'm not sure I have the time or the psychic energy to be able to take this other thing on right now?
It's our first movie. We never filmed anything before. And of course, when the war came to us, I never think about filming. I was too busy in deal with my unit, and I have no idea about this. But when Brendan called me and asked, "What you doing?" and how are you? And answer, we're almost okay. And we continue to make our porcelain figurines every night. And Brendan asked me, and what you doing during the day? And I answered, I'm in special force. Now I train in civilians how to defend their homes and their families. And very, very gentle Brendan asked me, probably I can film something around us, because it was really incredible, spectacular, and important experience to be there in that time. For me, it was incredible opportunity to share this experience we are artists. It's normal for us look around and find something interesting and beautiful. And in this situation, we was almost able to find something beautiful in the middle of this terrible destruction.
Brendan, it's one thing to make a movie with no filmmaker training, as the people who are making this movie have. It's another thing to make a movie with no equipment. So let's first address the former question. Can you talk about what I'll call your remote master class in filmmaking and how that worked and what skills you were able to impart and what things were kind of left to chance?
Absolutely. So we connected in such an interesting and organic way, actually, before many years before the invasion. We had actually met because one of our producers is Polish, and she grew up under Russian oppression in Polish communism, and she discovered Anya and Slava's work, and she was so moved by it because it reminded her of home. And when she shared it with me, I had never seen anything like it. I thought, these figurines are incredible. How could they have such huge stories on something so small? And so the four of us actually began to work together on an animation project. And so when the invasion began, we had already connected as artists. And what Slava talks about how we began this idea to start filming, it instantly moved into, okay, we know we're all storytellers. We know there's a universal story to tell that's larger even than what's happening in Ukraine. And we can figure out how to do this together. So the first challenge was, how do we move cameras into a war zone? You can't just FedEx something into Kharkiv. So we were incredibly lucky to discover and meet an amazing group of volunteers. And it was actually a hairdresser in New Jersey who was moving medical supplies into Ukraine via Poland. And she offered to carry camera equipment. And she took this incredibly dangerous, long journey to bring these cameras into Slava's arms. And when they got there, now we had this challenge of, okay, what's next? What do we do? So at this time, I asked Anya, how are you feeling? And she told me, we're so alone here, we feel like we're on the moon. And this phrase stuck with me. It reminded me of the Apollo 13 mission. It reminded me of when these astronauts were stranded in outer space. They had a duplicate of every single piece of equipment back on the ground at NASA. And so for every camera that we sent to Slava and our cinematographer, Andrey, we had a duplicate here in Los Angeles. And I could hold this camera or lens or microphone in my hand. And we created an impromptu film school, actually over Zoom. And we were able, even though we didn't speak the same language, even though we were 6,000 miles apart and had all of these cultural differences, to use the common language of art to share with them how to dive into cinema.
So your cinematographer, Andrey Stefanov, and Slava, you've never made a movie before. And maybe not knowing all the rules is a good thing because you're not bound by convention. And I think of some shots, like there's a shot of a porcelain figurine coming out of a kiln where the camera is in the oven looking up. That is totally creative. And I'm wondering, as you're filming, are you just making things up because you don't know what you can and can't do?
Even though they had never used film cameras before, video cameras, they're graphic storytellers. And even on the figurines, they're so inventive with their perspective, with their emotional ideas, with the sense of story and relationships and character. And Andrey, who is an oil painter by trade, a master artist, he knows where to put his canvas. And so he knew where to put a camera. And Slava is the same way. They're always experimenting with new ideas about how to use their art form. And so we were able to not only see how incredible it was for them to just take those abilities that were so natural to them and move that into cinema, but we collaborated by actually sharing drawings and photographs. So even though we didn't speak the same language, we communicated with the universal language of art every day.
And Slava, can you talk a little bit about your own thoughts about photography and how that influenced the way you wanted the story told and how your eye changed working with film as opposed to still photography?
Really, thanks to Brendan, it was really easy to film this because we understood our project have Brian in Los Angeles, and we must be eyes of our project and just look around really attentively. We filmed a lot. We filmed 500 hours. And we filmed anything, we try to find beauty. Anya, like soul of our project, from the very beginning, she told me we will find beauty because all war looks the same. It's especially in news footage, and we will never concentrate it of something terrible and disgusting. We will show our life inside the war through our art and through artistic language. But in any case, first year of our project, I was in our army and I was not independent, and I was able to work on our movie only because our project have completely support of my friends in my unit. Because when I hold my camera, somebody pick up my weapon and fight instead of me. And they think it's important. They think camera may be a really powerful weapon because truth is our weapon.
This is a movie, and you alluded to this, Slava, about contrasts between pastoral beauty and urban devastation, between love and conflict, between art and war, between the act of creating and the act of destroying. And those ideas are always at the center of the story. But did you look for visual ways of representing that? Did it reveal itself in editorials? You're putting the film together, or were you really intentional about picking shots that showed that contrast between those multiple different ideas?
Well, I can certainly say that Anya and Slava, even in their own work, they're always looking for contrast. And so the figurines themselves and the animations that we have within the film chronicle their incredibly peaceful life before the war, and then the atrocities that happened, especially at the beginning of the invasion and throughout, and even their hopes for the future. And these things are just spanning the gamut of human emotion. It's incredible, their instincts for this, and that has a deep contrast within it. But at the same time, their day-to-day lives, one minute Slava is creating something beautiful, and the next he's going out to the front line, he's fighting, training civilians. And for me, it was so incredibly emotionally devastating. Even though I was here safe in Los Angeles, Slava would be sending footage, and he would send me a text and he would say, there's shelling, the power is out, the internet's out. And then I wouldn't hear anything, and I would be up all night, and I would be holding my breath. And finally he would say, we're okay, here come the shots. But it was just an emotional whiplash what they were going through. So the contrasts are inherent in their lives and in their art.
Let's take a look at another clip from Porcelain War.
В моих фигурках много природы. Меня всегда интересовала смена времен года, выраженная в цветах листьев. Жизненный цикл бабочки. Прилет и отлет птиц осенью. Это все больше вдохновляет, чем город, например, в котором я живу.
Ми звичайні люди у надзвичайній ситуації.
Even to talk about the question you asked a couple minutes ago, the contrast was just inherent in every roll of footage that came in. One minute it would be a beautiful bug or a bird or a landscape, and the next it would be fire along the horizon and rubble. And we absolutely looked for that in the cut and in every aspect of the film to just show people this is what they're going through every day.
Slava, you mentioned this idea of the camera as weapon in a way, that it could be just as effective as a machine gun. And I'm wondering, because the film posits the idea that art is in of itself a rebellious act. And I'm wondering, does that apply to the making of this film? Is the making of this film also an act of rebellion against the Russian invaders?
I hope it's so. A camera like a weapon, it's more idea of people of my unit. Maybe I feel in camera more like new tool, new brush to paint with. And we try to show through our art and try to show very personal experience, not in news footage, how it is for me like an artist, and how it is for me like a soldier to be in the middle of this destruction, because especially our culture was under shelling. It's really kind of culture casualty. These ruins, it's ruins of our culture, because since the start of big war, our university was destroyed, our museums was destroyed, and so many our artists was killed. And it's our duty to work instead of all these people, because nobody can bring them back to life.
It's fair to say that a museum is not a military target, as are apartment buildings, the other things that the Russians have targeted. And it feels like, especially in watching your film, that the Russians aren't just invading, they're trying to destroy the culture. And they're trying to destroy the culture by going after the people who create the culture. And those are artists, those are writers, those are poets, those are people who make porcelain figurines. If they're not specifically targeting them, that is a wish that the culture itself is destroyed and that it becomes a Russian culture. And that, I think, is what you're referring to, Slava, is that the attacks obviously were on a lot of civilians, but they were specifically on art institutions as well.
That's absolutely true, John. And one of the things that Slava talks about is this concept that to record what is happening is in and of itself, absolutely, as you're saying, an act of resistance against that, because this is a genocidal war in that it is an authoritarian government that is seeking to eradicate and destroy a culture. It is seeking to eradicate a uniqueness that people have, and that's contained within art, within music, within poetry. And the goal of that is control. And anything that you can do to put new art into the world is a direct resistance of that. And the fact that this film can even be made is because there are people in Ukraine who are still fighting for that freedom.
I want to ask about the use of drones in this film. Drones have become a central weapon in the war, and there are countless subreddit video posts of drones killing Russian invaders. Drones are also a tool used by documentary filmmakers who deploy the cameras to get shots they otherwise wouldn't be able to capture. And then it feels like there's a third dimension to drones in your film, and that is that they are works of art painted with gorgeous ornamentation. Can you discuss that relationship between the drone as a piece of art, because it's both beautiful and it's deadly?
My commander gave us all footage from drones, from our drones. It's really battle footage, but because people of my unit, they are civilians and artists as well. It maybe sometimes looks really artistic. We used very different kind of footage. We take video from body camera. We have all recorded Battle of Bakhmut. We used animated clip, and Brandon was able to connect all these so different kind of footage, so natural and so organic, used his incredible skills.
Brendan, I'm sure there was a part of you that wanted to go to Ukraine and make this movie. But there's probably a part of you that knows by your going, you changed the way the story is told. And in your own mind, that's got to be a difficult decision. But how would you, I guess, hypothetically, how would your presence have made it for a different film? I guess another way of putting it is, what do you get when you're not there that would be different?
That's an amazing question. And at the very beginning, when we first started working together, I had actually planned on traveling into Ukraine and bringing a whole crew. And we were very lucky to send one camera in advance. And I had no idea if Slava and Andrey would have, even the desire or the wherewithal to film anything, but they did. And it was incredible. And it was so personal and it was so honest and it was very, very intimate. And I realized, and all of us discussed, if we go, it's like if we're having a conversation over dinner and there's a whole camera crew there, that's not the same conversation. And I thought, this is the most unique opportunity I think I've ever heard of to record a story. You have people that are storytellers recording their own lives, and you don't need to have a crew there shifting that or observing or looking in. It's their story in their words through their eyes.
You mentioned the earlier plan about doing something that was animation related about the porcelain figures. And I think we see a little bit of that when some of the paintings on the figurines come to life. Could you talk a little bit about that animation? I assume Anya did it because it's very specific to her style, and how it became incorporated into the film.
Absolutely. So the animation in the film is actually three animated sequences, and they're based on the stories that Anya and Slava are imbuing on the surfaces of the figurines that Anya paints. It's her language, she says. And so these are records of what they're going through, and they're very, very rich. And so we actually collaborated with an amazing company in Poland called Blue. It's a collective of artists, and they studied 10 years of Anya's paintings, and they drew 7,000 hand-drawn frames in her style, and we mapped those onto the porcelain of the figurines. And these were something that was always a part of the story because there's so much life in these. They almost look like they're moving even when they're not. And so animation was such a natural path. And it's just we're really, it was an honor. Everybody felt that Anya's language, it was like stepping into her world. And it was kind of a dream for her to see the result.
And Anya created these three figurines especially for this movie and paint on it a story about our future, present, and past. The first figurine represents our peaceful past before invasion. The second one, it's about invasion, about destruction and refugees. And the third, it's about our dreams and about our hope, about future of our country.
I want to ask about the music in this film because you have not only a score, but a performance by a band that is electric. Could you talk about this Ukrainian group and what they meant to the movie, both in terms of elevating it, but also in terms of understanding the emotional context of the story that we're seeing?
The score to the film is entirely composed of one group called Dakabraka, which is a Ukrainian group, and they're absolutely remarkable. At the beginning, when we first began filming and started editing, Slava and I were discussing, okay, what music might fit? Could it be an original score? And he shared with me Dakabraka, and we just thought, this is the only thing. It so perfectly captures the entire range of feeling, the culture, the highest highs, the lowest lows, everything that people of Ukraine are going through. And they actually were so supportive of the film. They gave us their entire catalog and even unreleased music that we were able to use. And we ended up editing the film to this music from the very, very beginning. So the spirit, the rhythm, the soul of the film, and Dakabraka, they're intertwined. And we felt this would be the most authentic way to bring people viscerally into Ukraine. And yes, there is a performance in the film. You'll see a whole song, and the way that they perform, I've never seen something with so much soul in it.
Slava, I want to say something that I think is pretty true, and that is the United States is struggling, or more accurately, failing to understand the importance of stopping Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. People who don't seem to appreciate how high the stakes are. What would you say to them, and how do you hope the film might help change their way of seeing Ukraine?
I hope sometime we really can change people's mind, because after screening, audience react very kind and very good, and we receive so many questions how we can help, what we can do for you, how we can help. I hope people who will see our movie will understand what happened in Ukraine, what kind of this war is, and they will understand evil exists, but we can fight against this evil. We still ready to fight, and it's important, because if we lose, somebody will buy much more. It will be much more expensive.
And I'll add a layer to this, Slava, exactly what you said. This is also the largest war in Europe since World War II. This conflict affects everybody, and it really matters now. And however you vote, we never tell anybody to vote this way or that, but however you vote, it impacts not only the people of Ukraine, but the people of the world. If Russia wins in Ukraine, there are other authoritarian governments that are watching this. For example, China has intentions with Taiwan to invade. And if Russia wins, it could very well bolster that. And that affects everybody. Ukraine was a free democratic nation that was unpromptedly invaded. And to be able to maintain democracy and to be able to fight for freedom and make sure that can be maintained in the world, it affects everybody, and this truly, truly matters.
Brendan,
and I really
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, and I really hope it's not about Ukraine only. It's about anybody who ready to support the democracy and the freedom. It's about how important is our free choice, how to think and how to create. I hope we bring from this middle of war kind of hope for best future.
Brendan, I asked this of the people who made the Navalny documentary, and I'll ask it of you. No filmmaker outwardly hopes his or her or their film will be pirated, but would it be an okay thing if this film got out in Russia and that people took a look at what was going on in Ukraine through these artists' eyes?
I would love for everyone to see this film everywhere. I think what it contains within it is something that can matter to all of us. It's this idea that no matter how dire the circumstances are, no matter how dark things can be, it's about our capability to be good. It's about courage. It's about bravery and creativity, and that you can put something good back into the world, even when it seems like all hope is lost. And that's a story that everyone should see.
I want to say one last thing too, and that is that this film has won a lot of awards. And I think those awards are important on an absolute scale, but also in elevating the profile of the film so that more people are talking about it and seeing it. And that seems to be happening, that it's become a part of the conversation, not only in Hollywood, but also among documentarians and also about the conversation around Ukraine. I want to say everybody should go watch this film. I also want to say thanks to our friends at Picture House, led by Bob and Jeannie Burney, and also really to Slava and Brendan for not only making this really important documentary, but also joining us today and sharing your thoughts about the movie. So for everyone who's watching, thanks for joining us for today's half hour with Porcelain War. Please go see it. I'm John Horn. Bye.